I'm Douglas Mason, CEO of Naturally Splendid, symbol NSP on the TSX Venture Exchange. Naturally Splendid is a biotechnology and consumer products company focused on the global cannabis and health markets. Naturally Splendid is expanding distribution in this rapidly growing market with products currently in Canada, the USA, South Korea, Germany, and Australia. To view our comprehensive company presentation and for more information, please visit our website at naturallysplendid.com.
You're listening to HowStreet.com radio, available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Welcome to HowStreet.com radio, the online source for market opinions. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is home ownership consultant Ross Kay from thewealthyhomeowner.ca. Welcome back to the show, Ross.
And thanks for having me back, Jim.
Ross, 7 steps to own a house. What are they?
7 steps to own a house. Okay. So when we look at your lifetime of ownership, when we look at the entire bucket of years that you're going to own a home or you're going to live, so say we're looking at 40 to 50 years, there are really only 7 things that happen in common for those people over those 40 years. And this is probably a lot of the reason why many of the younger would-be home buyers out there are confused, and why people later in life remain confused about housing. So the 7 steps that you have that you're going to walk through, actually, Jim, they go through your entire lifetime of ownership. They're not just about buying a house. It's actually about owning a house. The very first step that anyone ever has taken towards owning a home is making the decision. They make the commitment that they are going to be a homeowner. Unless you make that commitment, you will never become a homeowner. You have to make a logical, rational decision that you are going to become a homeowner. You're going to commit to that decision. You are going to commit to not being a tenant your entire life. Now, I think there's lots of reasons why people should commit to becoming a homeowner, and I'm going to say over 80% of the population should have that as their goal. They should be looking to make that commitment. They may need to be motivated with why they need to make that commitment, but the truth is that commitment needs to be made, and that's the very first step. The second step is, because now I'm committed to buying a home or owning a home, I need to come up with a down payment. And a down payment is a second stumbling block that people run into. And you're hearing it all over the country where they're making these crazy statements about having to work for 25 years to be able to cover a down payment, which is just lunacy. Even in Vancouver, that is not the truth. In Toronto, that's not the truth. It's not the truth anywhere, because it would be impossible. I mean, if that was the case, people wouldn't become homeowners. Once you become committed to becoming a homeowner, step 1, you move to step 2, which is saving your down payment. Now, once you have made that commitment, home buyers or would-be homeowners generally make a whole bunch of other compromises. They may decide to move back home, live with their parents. And instead of paying rent, now they're going to be saving for their down payment. So instead of spending $1,500 a month in rent, every 3 months you're saving $3,000 towards your down payment, and 3 times 4 is $12,000 a year. So you're saving $12,000 a year towards your down payment. In Canada, my firm recommends that you do not buy a house unless you have 10% down. 10% down is the number you should be targeting. The only time you're not targeting 10% down is when housing prices are escalating. I don't mean they're rising. I mean they are escalating. They are increasing more and more each month. In those type of markets, depending on the market that you're buying in, depending on how much acceleration is going on in home prices, you may want to enter the market at 5% down. The reason you may decide to do that is because by the time you close in the property, the additional savings that you would have made, it would have taken just too long. Normally, 95% of the time, whether it's British Columbia, Ontario, Vancouver, Toronto, or Prince Edward Island, you don't really want to buy a home until you save that 10% down. Because there is no advantage to doing it. The market is not moving quickly enough that it's going to offset any gains by buying with a lesser amount. So, number 2 step is saving your down payment. Again, there are strategies that you should be using to save that down payment. If you're in Vancouver right now, you're in Toronto right now, you're in Calgary right now, where housing prices are declining, this is the opportunity you've been waiting for. You need to be saving every penny you can to be able to put towards a down payment. Then, once you get that 10% down, you continue to save until the time is right to enter the market. And that's when you enter the market. Step number 3 is buying the house. After you have committed to owning a home, you've saved the down payment, the final step is buying your first home, entering the market, becoming a homeowner. Your listeners, I encourage them to buy when the timing is right. Do not buy when the timing is wrong. If you buy when the timing is wrong, it's going to cost you tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars over your lifetime. That's what it's going to cost you. If you buy when the timing is right, you're going to be that much wealthier, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars wealthier. So, you're going to buy a home is step number 3. Step number 4 is you're going to trade that home for another home. You're going to move up the property ladder. And that's step number 5, and that could be step number 6. You just keep moving up the property ladder, and those are the next steps that you make. Then, 30, 35, 40 years from now, you are going to make a decision to exit part of the housing market. You may decide to exit fully. You may decide to sell your residential real estate and move into a tenancy situation. That may be your decision. You may decide to sell part of your residential real estate and move to by moving to a cheaper community. In other words, you sell your $1 million house and you move to a community where your house only costs you $300,000. You live on the rest of the money that you had left over from your house, or you pass that on to the next generation. Today we saw an article from the Ontario Securities Commission about the 3 pillars of retirement wealth. Well, they didn't mention a house, Jim. They did not include your home in their retirement plan. And we say to ourselves, are these guys nuts? Your home is a capital gains exempt investment vehicle. That means that the return on your home's value only has to be a partial amount that you would have to return in the stock market. And that's only looking at it from a strictly dollar-to-dollar comparison. Since you've lived in that house and you haven't spent the rent on something else, there's that benefit. Now, I want your listeners to understand, I am not promoting anyone goes out and buys a home. I'm not promoting that right now. The timing is not right for you to do that right now. I can be pro-housing and still not be pro-market. I'm not pro-market right now because I know where all the metrics are leading. I still am pro-home ownership. Those are the 7 steps that you're going to follow. You're going to follow the same steps everyone before you has followed. Those steps remain exactly the same. Everyone, all current 11 million families who own homes in Canada have followed those exact same steps. Embrace them, follow them. Once you become committed, step number 1, once you make that commitment, step number 2 is saving for your down payment.
And Ross, that means things if, say, every Friday night you go out for drinks and dinner with your buddies. How about do that once a month?
Well, it's not
save. No, but you look at how expensive it is to go out, and I know a lot of young people too don't even know how to cook. They order out or eat out every night.
Well, I think that they probably know better how to cook than we did when we were starting out, because all of the cooking shows and everything else. But the problem with
they didn't have my mom who said, you're going to learn how to cook, you're going to learn how to sew buttons on your shirt, you're going to learn how to darn a sock, you're going to learn how to do laundry. And so I had to do those things as a kid growing up. She said, and did that help you when you moved out? Absolutely. So,
and what I would say is that's home economics 101. That's what real home economics is. The problem for the current generation is that they're not given home economics about home ownership economics.
No, nobody is.
That's where the problem is. And I just want everybody to rest assured that if you make that commitment to being a homeowner, you find a way of saving that down payment, whether that's, again, moving back in with your parents, not taking the trip down south, maybe becoming a commuter for a year, getting rid of that $6,000-$7,000 a year car expense. There's lots of ways to do something once you've committed to doing it. You need to become committed.
We'll have more with Ross Kay right after this.
I'm Greg Johnston, CEO of Carl Data Solutions, an industrial Internet of Things company that provides big data solutions for monitoring critical infrastructure. Carl Data offers machine learning and predictive analytics features through our cloud-based applications to deliver key asset-saving operational insights from massive amounts of data. Carl Data trades on the CSE symbol CRL and the pink symbol CDTAF. For more details on Carl Data, please visit carlsolutions.com.
Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, Recycling Trade Publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Ross Kay. Ross, are you worried that the shape of China's housing market could trigger a global recession?
Yeah. So Jim, I'm just going to go back to the last point, because as between shots here, I want to express something to your listeners. My wife and I were living together before we got married. We went to university together. We lived together. We decided that we wanted to own a home. What that meant was, we got rid of our apartment. My wife moved back in with her parents. I moved back in with my parents. And then over the next year, we saved every single nickel we made to go towards a down payment. So we're not giving advice on the show or recommendations or preaching. We're simply going over things that we have watched in our own past. And I know that you had experiences in your past that are similar too. So now we're on to this China topic, the commentary that 22% of the Chinese housing stock is sitting vacant. And listeners in Vancouver who know about vacant homes in Vancouver, know that this is something that's real. And when you hear about 22% of the houses in China being vacant, you can kind of understand why Chinese investors or investors from China believe there's nothing wrong with purchasing a home in Canada and leaving it vacant. That said, 22% vacancy in the housing stock in a nation the size of China very well could bring on a global recession, because sooner than later, that housing market is going to crash. There is no way to avoid it. Unless their population, the number of households, increases by 22% or 20% to fill up all those vacant homes, the value of those homes is going to plummet. The net wealth involved is going to plummet. A vacant home, which has been owned for a couple of years while housing prices have increased, is very easily sold by the investor at a lower price without the investor incurring a real loss. They may have had an on-paper loss because the property used to be worth $1 million. They are only getting $800,000 for it. But the truth is they only paid $5, so they're still making a $300,000 profit. The investor of these vacant homes can liquidate that asset overnight at a substantial loss, which is what I've always said is what the concern about Vancouver is. The concern about Vancouver or Toronto with these new condominiums that young, innocent investors who are actually speculators have bought because they listened to all these shills and hucksters in the new homes market. When those properties are built, they can come to the market instantaneously. They can flood the market. And when a market is flooded, housing prices plummet. They don't plummet because the market is flooded with houses. In other words, it's not because there's an overabundance of supply. It's just that the buyers are too smart. The buyers are smart enough to say, I'm not going to buy today because that house is going to be worth less tomorrow. And once that becomes a common belief, where people actually go out and are acting upon those decisions of waiting. In other words, I'm not going to buy a house in Vancouver right now because the housing prices are going to be less next month. When people start accepting that, very quickly, a housing market unravels. Very quickly, home prices start to drop. Those who are sitting on vacant properties like to get out of that vacant property prior to a loss hitting. They'll take a lesser profit just to get out of the market. Where a regular homeowner who may have a HELOC, may have a high mortgage rate because they got into the market at the wrong time, they're going to have to take a hit. And that is where real destruction takes place. When we heard this number of 22% from China, Jim, and then we found out this is an actual number generated by the Chinese government. So this is not a survey. This is not a StatsCan trying to figure out how many foreign owners or buyers bought in Vancouver and they used flawed data. This is not using people's last names to try to figure out what the numbers are. This is an actual government of China recording from land titles. 22% vacancy. We were shocked. We were shocked because we also know the way that these investors enter the market, they're buying almost all new housing stock. And they're buying it predicated on the next building being built, rising in value, being more expensive, and the unit that they had purchased previously riding on the coattails of those new developments for rising gains. Because that's what happens, we know the preponderance of those vacant homes are newly built homes. Those newly built homes are coveted by regular home buyers. When those come to market, the older homes, the older condos are next to impossible to sell. More price declines happen. When we hear 22% of the huge housing stock in China is vacant, it is highly likely, not even possible, highly likely that that would cause a global recession should that correction come to fruition.
Ross, speaking of vacant homes, Vancouver collected $30 million in the first year of their vacant home tax. The idea being that people don't leave a house empty when we have a rental crisis on the West Coast. Was this tax a good idea, and do you think it's going to work?
I believe that if you are a non-Canadian, you should not be entitled to own a home here unless you are paying a substantial yearly tax. That's what I believe. I do not believe that regular Canadians should not be able to own a house and keep it vacant. That's my personal belief. The $30 million is a joke. It is a token to those who are feeling harmed by previous decisions of governments to allow your housing stock to be owned by foreign owners. And your current government's refusal to demand through taxation that foreign owners sell their stock, their homes back to Canadians. Okay? That's how we view it, Jim. I also want to express, though, when I'm saying this, because I continue to hear this false narrative about Vancouver housing prices are out of whack because of foreign buyers. When your governments, your economists, your realtors allow the public, encourage the public, and they themselves believe that when one home sells, 200 homes are in its vicinity, their value is determined on the price of the one that sells, you have a massive problem. What I'm trying to say, Jim, is this. In Ontario last month, about 1 in every 266 homes sold. So for every 266 homes you would drive by in Ontario last month, province-wide, one of those houses would have sold. Now, I'm only talking about the houses that could sell. I'm not talking about the houses that couldn't sell, because there's another million of those I'm not even talking about. I'm talking about the houses that could be sold last month. 1 in 266 sold. Yet, in every newspaper across Canada and North America, you read about house price change in Ontario last month. This week, the Canadian Real Estate Association is going to release their Ontario numbers. They are going to predicate those monthly changes based on one house in every 266 homes selling. I hope your listeners understand how absurd this is, because this is why we are in the mess that we're in terms of housing prices, in terms of taxation, in terms of our economy. There is a false belief that a home buyer who has no training in housing markets, has no training in what the appraised value of a property should be, who only enters the market once every 12 years, is qualified to determine the value of 266 homes around the one that they're buying. Not only is that home buyer using their opinion to determine what the value of they should be paying for the house that they're buying, the government believes that buyer is determining the value of 266 other homes, 265 other homes. That is the way the housing market is presented to the public. Imagine a lot with 266 cars, and you're going to buy a car. You go into this lot, and the car dealer points out one car way over there. He says, that's the one car out of these 266 you can buy. You say, no problem. I brought my buddy with me, Joe. Joe read Car and Driver last month. He hasn't looked at a car magazine in 12 years, but he looked at Car and Driver last month, and he's coming with me to tell me how much I should pay for that car. I'm not going to look at the other 265. I'm not going to have a professional mechanic come and look at this car with me. I'm bringing Joe. Joe is going to look at this car after reading Car and Driver, and he's going to give me his opinion what I should pay for this car. If he thinks what you're asking is okay, yeah, I'll give you the money. If he tells me, no, I don't think it's enough, well, then I'm just going to move over to the other lot where they have 266 cars, and I'm going to look at the one that's for sale over there. It is absurd, Jim. The reason why we get housing bubbles is because home buyers have no respect and no representation in North America. That's why. Your listeners can understand this point of view. This, in 2017, there was over $400 billion spent by home buyers in Canada. Canadian home buyers spent over $400 billion. That's 0.4 trillion. That's what Canadian home buyers spent. Yet, they had no representation. They were sent into that parking lot with 266 cars, and they were said, there's only one car in this lot that you can buy, and we're going to let you pay whatever your opinion is, whatever you can come up with. We're not going to tell you what that car is worth. We're not going to do our due diligence to see how many miles it's got on it. We're not going to tell you whether or not it needs new tires. We're not going to tell you whether or not it needs a paint job. We're just going to let you give us your opinion on what that car is worth, and we'll sell it to you for that. Oh, by the way, we're asking $10,000 for it. If you want to pay $9,999, we're not going to sell it to you. Oh, and by the way, there is another buyer who's on the lot looking right now. So, even though the car is overpriced at $10,000, we want the two of you guys to bid on it to see which one of you will pay the most money. Because none of those other 265 cars are for sale. You can't buy them. We're telling you, not you, we're telling you, you cannot buy them. If those people were working with us, we would tell them, oh yeah, probably half of those 265 cars, you could buy half of them. You probably could buy 130. There is no need for you to go out there, use your opinion to overpay for a property. Yet, over $400 billion was spent in Canada last year by home buyers doing exactly that. $400 billion was spent by Canadian home buyers being treated like second-class citizens, not only by realtors, but by banks, by the government, by CMHC.
We'll have more with Ross Kay right after the break.
Cypress Development Corp's flagship lithium project is located just east of Albemarle's Silver Peak mine in the heart of Clayton Valley, Nevada. A 12-hole exploration drill program for lithium-enriched claystone on Cypress's 100% controlled properties is now underway. Cypress Development Corp trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol CYP, the Pink's CYDVF, and on Frankfurt's C1Z1. For more information, please visit our website, cypressdevelopmentcorp.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Ross Kay. Ross, a survey suggests Canadians believe housing prices will be higher in the spring. Why would they believe that, and will those prices be higher?
They are believing that, Jim, because you have an entire infrastructure. You have an entire system. You have an economy built on rising home prices. That's why. So every single opportunity that takes place to promote the sale of a home is what happens. When your real estate stats are released each month, the way real estate stats are always designed to present the best picture of the market for you. I know many of your listeners right now are listening. Well, Ross, back in 2016, you said housing prices had dropped 26% in Vancouver. We didn't hear about those prices until the fall of 2018. It was 2 years before we heard that. How long is it going to take us to hear about the next bad news or about further falling prices. And what I'm going to tell your listeners is this. You're never going to hear about it. The way that housing stats work is, as the housing market slows down and the price metrics come about, you never really hear about the house price declines that take place. And after the year ends, you're never going to hear about them anymore. You may look at some historical perspective of what housing prices sold in 2015, 2016, 2017, but you're not going to hear about how they fluctuated during that year and why the year end ended up where it was. Because when the year end ends up where it does, it had nothing to do with house prices. I'll give your listeners this reference point. When a housing market is its busiest in a month, the most number of sales take place, and your buyer mix at that time is predominated by trade-up buyers. When your housing market is at its slowest, the number of sales is at its lowest, and the buyer mix is dominated by first-time buyers. So your house price gain is the smallest. Obviously, when the market is the slowest, with the lowest house prices, are added to when the market is the busiest, where trade-up buyers are buying, it's always heavily weighted towards that part of the market. As a market is on the upswing, that is what keeps driving the market higher, and you get the ridiculous comments like housing prices have increased 30% year over year in 2016 in Vancouver and 30% year over year in Toronto. What you don't ever get, because the way the stats, the numbers work, is the declining 30%. You will never see that in a historical review. So, how long do housing numbers take to catch up to the market? Up to 2 years. But even then, you're reading prices that are 2 years stale dated. You're always behind the curve.
So, Ross, briefly, next year, will prices be going up in the spring or not?
Will prices be... The real estate boards will report, very well could report, that the average selling price increased in certain months during the year if they compare it against other certain months. What your listeners need to understand is a composite mix of the exact same homes will decline in value. Regardless of what the real estate board tells you to create house price illusion, try to attempt to build the housing bubble up, the price of the identical home will be less next year in almost every market in Canada. Quebec, we don't know, we really can't see. Quebec very well could still be about a 1 or 2% gain. But British Columbia, Alberta, and Ontario, the exact same house will be worth less money.
Ross, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Hey, thanks, Jim.
My guest has been homeownership consultant Ross Kay from thewealthyhomeowner.ca. If you have any questions for Ross, and a lot of people do every week, you can send them to info@housestreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on HoweStreet.com radio are an expression of opinion only and should not be construed in any matter whatsoever as recommendations to buy or sell any financial instrument at any time. Available online at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. HoweStreet.com radio is a production of House Street Media Incorporated.